With the technology industry, it seems that every generation of graphics cards or processors we hear terms like game-changing or revolutionary thrown around. But yeah, it's fair to say that the industry has changed significantly over the past few years, and one of the biggest, perhaps, revolutions in technology is going to be coming next year from AMD with RDNA 3, aka Navi 3X. It's going to be incredibly impressive technology, not just because of the performance levels that we're going to be seeing, but a number of different technologies which are going to be implemented within the architecture. We're going to be discussing those in this very video, along with perhaps some exclusive information concerning the Infinity Cache design of the GPU. Let's get into it right after the message from our sponsor. If you're running a copy of Windows 10 which isn't activated, of course, not only do you have to worry about the missing customization options, but there's also that annoying Windows desktop watermark reminding you to activate. Today's video is sponsored by WhoKeys.com, and they have an excellent price on Windows 10 Professional as well as Home keys. Yeah, and they also of course sell games. I've bought a few Windows 10 keys with my own personal account to test everything was legit and worked in preparation for this sponsored video. You can pick up one of their keys for 25% off using the coupon code RGT in the checkout. There's links to their website in the video description. Also, if you're building a few systems, there's bundles available too. Again, you can check out WhoKeys.com and use the coupon code RGT for 25% off the listed Windows 10 key prices. I figure the best way to tackle this video would be to go with an overview of everything we know so far of RDNA 3, at least within reason. Obviously there have been so many leaks, so many rumours with RDNA 3, it's been kind of difficult to keep track. So we'll go with a brief overview of everything we know, and then we're also going to be tackling the Infinity Cache information, because again there has been some conflicting information regarding that, so I want to throw you guys what I've been hearing regarding Infinity Cache, not just in terms of the layout of it, but also the quantities as well. With that said, let's get into it. Navi 3X, or RDNA 3 if you prefer, is going to launch late next year to my understanding. The highest end SKU, Navi 31, is being designed to give AMD performance leadership. It is just a rumour at this stage, of course, these products haven't released, but the rumour that I'm hearing is that Navi 31 is going to be pretty ludicrous. We'll discuss 31 more in a moment though, but let's start out with 33. It's apparently going to be produced on TSMC's 6nm process, which, as we've discussed many times at this point, is basically a refinement of their 7nm process. It's being reported that 33 contains 5120 shaders. To my knowledge, this is right, although I am hearing conflicting numbers of shaders per workgroup processor. Basically, I'm hearing both 128, which works out to be the same number as Navi 2X, although the concept of compute units is void with RDNA 3, we'll discuss more about that later, and also 256 shaders, which would be the same number as Navi 31 and 32. The leading number that I'm hearing so far does seem to be 128 though. This basically means that we have 4 shader engines total. So each shader engine houses 10 workgroup processors. So the math here is 128 shaders times 10 WGPs, and then of course we have again 4 shader engines, and this gives us 5120 shaders. Naturally though, the Infinity Cache is going to be a lot smaller than Navi 31. I'm hearing it's probably going to be 128 megabytes, which weighs in the same as Navi 21, and still utilizes GDDR6 memory. It's possible it could be a little bit faster though than what we have with Navi 21, for example the 6900 XT. Basically though, the performance numbers of this part does appear to be decently ahead of the 6900 XT, particularly when it comes to ray tracing. I've been hearing figures between 20% and 50% faster. Now, it's hard to know whether the 20% is raster performance or whether the 50% is raster performance or the 50% is ray tracing performance. Either way though, it does seem that 6900 XT is going to get quite easily spanked by Navi 33. Personally, I'm thinking that it's probably going to be closer to 50% in raster as well, given the fact that there's going to be numerous architecture improvements. But as for Navi 34, which is, of course, been rumoured for a while, and this is something that I just want to discuss briefly. In the early stages, I had heard a lot of stuff regarding Navi 34, that it was going to be a lower end part, that it's going to be, of course, essentially what we have with AMD's previous parts, where they just continue to shave down the number of compute units, cache, and all that stuff. But I wasn't given any real details, only that it, of course, again, would be the lowest end SKU, and probably, if it was to release, it would be later in the market than all of the other parts. Again, this is exactly what AMD and Nvidia have done with the lower end parts previously. However, I'm starting to lean to this information being incorrect, or Navi 34 being significantly delayed, because basically I've heard absolutely nothing from this since, despite the fact I've stalked numerous people. I have been hearing that RDNA 2 will be bringing up the rear, i.e. it will be the lower end parts for AMD's next generation lineup. And as I've already discussed, AMD are going to be utilizing TSMC's 6nm process for Navi 33, and allegedly there's going to be a refresh of sorts for Navi 2X, which is going to be the lower end. Honestly, I'm not too sure about this at the moment. It's possible that AMD themselves haven't 100% decided on this course of action, so we'll just wait and see. Navi 31, though, and 32 are perhaps the GPUs that most folks are interested in. After all, they do represent the pinnacle of performance from the company, and those always generate the most excitement. But unfortunately, these products are going to be expensive. I've spoken about this in a video already, but I'm hearing $2,000 plus is the price that we're going to be seeing the higher end Navi 31s hit. In fact, the highest end SKU was described to me by one person as a, quote, Titan of Titan, end quote, based GPU, and that it would be priced extremely expensively, well over $2,000. Yet, basically, this is the kind of card where, if you remember, like, the, triple Crossfire or SLI setups, this is the kind of card that you would probably want to buy. It's essentially the equivalent. It's going to be really expensive, guys. That's what I'm hearing. But the performance is kind of nuts. Up to 3 times apparently faster than the 6900 XT, which is quite ludicrous when you think about it, though. Now, it is really early to discuss pricing of products, as prices can and will change depending on tons of market conditions. In fact, Nvidia and AMD have famously decided prices last minute. For example, the RTX 20 prices apparently were basically decided really close to the announcement. So, we'll have to wait and see before final prices. But all I'm saying is that I don't think they're going to be cheap. Let's just say that. Outside of this, though, most folks already know that Navi 31 is a chiplet-based design. This design, though, really boils down to 2 types of die and the various ways that they are connected together, the interconnects. The die types are GCD and MCD. I've leaked those names quite a long time ago. In fact, I believe I was the first to mention those names. The GCD is basically the graphics, and the MCD being memory. Or, actually, that's not correctly true. It's actually the cache. You can think of it sort of as an evolution of AMD's Infinity Cache, which of course debuted with Navi 2X, which, we'll focus first of all on the GCDs. They are produced on the 5nm process from TSMC. The highest end Navi 31 SKU would have 15,360 shaders enabled. This would be across 2 dies. So it seems that we're looking at 256 shaders per work group processor, or WGP. In old terms, you could think of this as 4 compute units worth of shaders, because we have 64 shaders per compute unit, for example with Polaris, but again, compute units are no longer a thing, and basically the shaders are arranged directly inside of the workgroup processor. Kopity7, Kimi, and Grayman both discussed this back in the day, but the traditional compute unit is now a thing of the past, and you can really think of, at least for this video and our kind of overview, as the workgroup processor being the building block of Navi, or at least Navi 3.1. Based on what I'm told then, each of these Navi 31 GCDs can have 30 workgroup processors enabled per GCD, so this means that the highest end SKU would have 60 total. This is, of course, 2 GCDs with 30 workgroup processors each. In turn, that's 7680 shaders per GPU die, and of course we double this because there are 2 GCDs. Again, this is the highest end configuration, so that's 15,360 shaders, assuming this information is accurate. I am told that the die houses 3 shader engines each. This means 10 workgroup processors per shade engine again, assuming my information is correct. Either way, this GPU is, well, it's just kind of ridiculous. I'm told that we're expecting over 75 T-flops of FP32 performance, and honestly, it's not too difficult to figure out that this is true. You can do a quick bit of math for FP32 performance yourself. 15,360 shaders times 2, multiply by 2500, which of course represents the megahertz, and we can easily see that 76 T-flops is possible. In fact, I suspect it's going to be more than that, but yeah, we'll see on frequencies on final silicon. Aside from this, memory config is still 256-bit, using GDDR6 memory, and I do believe AMD are going to go balls to the wall and get the fastest GDDR6 they can get their hands on, but really the MVP, of course, is going to be the Infinity Cache. It makes its triumphant return for Navi 3X, but for Navi 31 I've been hearing two figures in terms of the capacity. The first is 256 and the second is 512 megabytes. I was told by source 1 that AMD have been testing two variants, and that 512 was quote ideal, but they were concerned over quote costs, end quote. Source 2 confirmed that they were also being two SKUs tested, but now a third person has told me that AMD seems to have settled on 512, at least for the highest end SKU. I'm about to put words in sources' mouths here, i.e. speculate, but possibly cheaper Navi 31 variants could have smaller Infinity Cache quantities to cut down costs, or maybe this will meet Navi 32. I'm speculating. I don't have solid info. Quite frankly, 512 megabytes is a lot of Infinity Cache for this chip, and I do wonder if it is true, because damn, that's a lot of cache. And performance, I'm hearing for the 256 wasn't that much worse. Who knows, honestly. Again, I was told that there are two variants being tested. Who knows what ends up being released. I was also told, though, that you can think of Infinity Cache, though, for Navi 3, anyway, as multiple dies. Just to be clear, this is Navi 31. Remember, Navi 33 is monolithic. So Navi 31, which we'll be focusing on here, isn't a single MCD cache chiplet. There are two GPU dies as well. So yeah, I was told there are over 10 dies total by one source. Now, it's worth noting the same source told me it's 512 megabytes, so I'm basing what I'm about to say on that. But I was told that it's not, one just chip. Instead, there are multiple dies together, and each of these dies is smaller than what we have the Ryzen V cache 64 megabyte stack. I want to be very clear that they were not willing to give me the final total of dies, but going over the potential configurations, 64 megabytes is 8 MCDs, that's 512 megabytes, divided by 64, of course that gives you 8, then you have 2 GCDs, that's 10 dies total, but that doesn't seem to be right to me, since again, it's implied to be by a couple of people that they're smaller capacitors than this. I'm leaning towards it being 32 megabytes per die, so that's 16 MCDs and 2 GCDs, so that's 18 total. But yeah, while that sounds cool and all, it really is important for me to hammer home that this is not a simple design, right? It's really easy to think of Navi 31 as just a bunch of MCDs and GCDs, but really it's a massive disservice to the level of engineering and interconnection necessary for this to go brr. About a month ago, AMD actually provided us with some diagrams for CDNA 2, and the chiplet-based design that it sports. To my understanding, we're kind of looking at a similar design for RDNA 3, albeit more complicated. There's a great pattern which actually shows a hint of how this is achieved. Basically speaking, it's just going to be marvelous to see how AMD, Nvidia, and Intel embrace the chiplet future, especially when it comes to graphics, because they're so damn complicated. In fact, the GCDs essentially act as the brains, with things like workgroup processors, command processors, and more housed within. This is actually a bit contrary to what I was originally told. I was initially told that the MCDs probably also housed the memory controller as well, and this doesn't seem to be the case. Basically, all of that seems to be on the GCD. And yeah, there's a lot of challenges basically that AMD needs to overcome, or rather has overcome, to create all of this. A great example is yet another pattern. This basically shows how the dies on the GPU, or at least multiple dies, can essentially act as one. The host CPU, so your Ryzen or Intel processor, essentially just communicates or believes it's communicating only with one GPU. I think I've done an analysis of this pattern already, but basically work is dispatched to the other GPU, which is present on the card itself, because remember there's two of them for Navi 31, via an active bridge. This is another pattern we've discussed earlier this year. It's a very interesting design. There's a lot of challenges, of course, as I said, that AMD needs to overcome, but it's going to be just as interesting to me to see how Nvidia and Intel deal with these challenges. Hopper is also MCM. To my understanding, though, the two patents, according to what I'm told anyway, do pertain to RDNA 3, but really the problem with patents is that their exact implementation will differ a little anyway, at the very least, to the final products. I'll leave the highly technical stuff of these patents for now though. I've already gone over them, as I said, I think in separate videos, and to be honest, this video is already getting kind of lengthy. Plus, also, I'm sure when AMD get closer to the launch of RDNA 3, we'll get a much better understanding. I seriously just want a bloody die shot and a die breakdown at this point of one of these products. It's really interesting. Anyway, enough of my drool. Let's continue, shall we? Power consumption figures, I've mentioned them a dozen times at this point. 375 watts seems to be the current, you get it? Current? I'm sorry, target. Though there is a small chance of up to 400 watts for reference GPUs, and that's the key. I've been hearing that AMD have given the thought to letting AIBs have higher end variants up to 450 watts for Navi 31. This is basically a kind of green light to say that the AIB could go up to it if they're willing to invest, or I suppose charge you, if you prefer, the really crazy cooling solutions and the power delivery, because obviously you can imagine just how robust the power delivery needs to be for this thing. Let's just say this, yeah, it's going to be a thing. And then AMD will be okay for them to go up to 450 watts. It's a lot of juice, but given the performance targets AMD is aiming for, it's not exactly a surprise. We've already seen AMD have given us a preview of what to expect with TSMC's 5nm process. But remember, we don't really know the efficiency or stuff of what they've done with RDNA 3 versus RDNA 2, and ultimately AMD have done a crap ton, that's a technical term, of optimization for RDNA 2's power optimizations. I've actually done some benchmarking of that and discussed it quite at length. They actually pulled off some of the folks who were working on the power optimization of Zen, or on Zen 2 and Zen 3 to be specific, to help work on RDNA 2 and RDNA 3. And remember, given the fact that RDNA isn't just like, oh, high-end desktops, but for a plethora of devices, Samsung have recently confirmed that their Exynos GPUs are going to be supporting RDNA 2, and they're going to be talking about it more. I think from memory it's the 10th of January. And of course, we'll also see RDNA in other devices like consoles. Yeah, basically power optimization is going to be really important. And as of the time I'm recording this video, their CES event hasn't occurred, but we already know, or at least it's leaked, that it's going to utilize the 6nm refresh for the mobile GPUs, and apparently they're going to be considerably more power efficient, blah, 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 blah. So it'll be really interesting to see what we can get out of this. Closing out the video, I'm going to be absolutely fascinated to see the direction AMD, Nvidia and Intel go with upcoming products. It's hard to deny that with products such as Rembrandt in terms of AMD's APU offerings, that combined with their FSR, or I suppose RSR technology, which if you've not heard is basically a driver level implementation of FSR. It's of course still using land shows for its upsampling, so it's still essentially a spatial upscaler, and it's kind of designed to compete around NVIDIA's NIS, which again is also land shows. But yeah, with those technologies and Rembrandt's more powerful iGPU, I do suspect that the discrete market, at least for lower end cards, is going to be constrained a little. And I think that AMD and Intel's offering here is going to be definitely putting a lot of pressure on Nvidia. With that said, DLSS 3 and FSR 2 are going to perhaps be the most interesting to me in terms of the software perspective. Because ultimately, while all of these cards are great and all, and obviously more power equal good, it's still incredibly difficult to run titles at high refresh rates when you're cranking up, you know, hardware-based ray tracing and all of the other effects, especially going with a 4K native output. I'll be really interested to see what Nvidia does announce over the next several months, to be honest with you. And I do have some Nvidia information for RTX 40, as well as, you know, generally their kind of plans of the future. But I'm going to hold off on that for now because I'm quite curious to see what they announce at CES. And furthermore, I'm trying to do a little bit more due diligence before releasing the video. With that said, thank you very much for watching this video. Wow, that was, you can tell that I was not scripted, couldn't you? Anywho, thanks very much, guys, for watching. As of the time I'm recording this, it's also, well, kind of close to New Year's. So if you're watching this on New Year's Eve, Happy New Year to you. And if you're watching this in the future, hopefully the new year is going awesome for you. I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.